Indiana County 911. My brother's gone. Can you be a little more specific, sir? He took my brother. Who took him? I don't know who took him. I don't know what. Sir, take a breath. Explain to me what happened.
And I looked out and there was this big red blinking UFO.
I can just say this. Something's going on in the woods. Something's going on.
They're not dogs, they're not coyotes. What could it be, right?
I had an encounter with a skunk ape, and it completely altered the course of my life.
I found a skull. I think you guys are going to want to come film this.
Put him out.
I just see it.
Sightings of a UFO hovering over a barn.
Millie woke up from a dream, and when I went into the bedroom, she said there's a monster on the wall.
They saw that the creature had run through a barbed wire fence. They were able to obtain hairs. They sent the hairs to their lab, and it came back as an unknown creature.
Bizarre Encounters with Shayn and Orin.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to the most bizarre show on the internet. I am the one that they call Shayn Squatch.
And I am the big, bad, boo daddy, Orin Felix.
The biggest, baddest daddy. That sounded weird coming out of my mouth. That was kind of icky.
Not the biggest, but maybe the baddest.
Definitely the baddest boo daddy. So I'm going to throw this in right in the beginning of the show before we get into anything else, because I'm just so excited to be able to announce this to you guys. On the last episode, I had mentioned that I was going to set up a voicemail box / phone number for you guys to be able to call into the show. And we can do a couple different things with this. But the whole intention with it is that, one, if you guys have some encounter reports that you guys want to report to us, rather than trying to type it out or email it to us, this will make it even easier. You guys can just make a quick phone call. It'll record onto the voicemail box, and then I can take that recording off. And then the intention is that with that, I have, for people who have been following on Instagram, I'm planning on doing a new sideshow for Patreon called The Reality Report. And part of what I was going to do for that is include a lot of your guys' personal encounters, along with also using them in the beginning of the Bizarre Encounters on certain episodes. And I also want to do some compilation episodes where Orin and I go over some of your guys' encounters. So the only way we're going to be able to do that is if you guys are willing to call in, give us some of your encounter reports, be featured on the show. So again, now there's a phone number for that. And also, if you guys just want to call in and say something nice about the show, that's also definitely an option too, and we wouldn't be opposed to that. And you guys can also leave those as voicemail in the voicemail box. But if anybody is interested in doing that and recounting or leaving those encounter reports for us, you guys can now call us and leave a voicemail at 313-364-1551. And for anybody that didn't catch that, it will be at the top of the show description. Well, the top of the show notes down in the show description. And the second piece of news and updates is our next event. So, Orin, why don't you tell them a little bit about what we got going on?
That's right. We've got Cryptid Halloween 3. It's coming up in just a few weeks. It'll be Saturday, the 26th of October from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. It's going to be at the Ranson Civic Center in Ranson, West Virginia. We are going to be speaking and also emceeing. This is the event we spoke at last year. Our good buddy Dave, a.k.a. the Snarly Yow, hosts this event. He's the coolest dude ever, nicest dude ever. We're really looking forward to it. So if y'all are in the area, definitely come out and check it out. It's a free event, and you can talk to our dumbasses if you want to.
And we're definitely going to be having fun, so make sure you guys come up and hang out with us. And maybe we'll even try to do another after-party type thing like we tried to do last year again this year, depending on how many of you guys show up.
Yeah, you can come and hang out with me at the casino if you want to.
Betting on horses, right? Oh, wait, was that where the horse track was? No, wait, this wasn't the horse track. Or this was.
It was. Oh, this is where the horse track was. So, yes.
Yeah, you won't find Orin. Where the hell is Orin at? He's at the horse track.
Playing the ponies, motherfucker.
Playing on them ponies. And I already kind of previously mentioned it, but this podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences on the show, for the show, or for us to investigate. So if you guys don't want to necessarily call in, you guys can always type those out too, and you guys can send those to ommEncounterReports@outlook.com. There is also a submission form, which is available on the Linktree, along with another one to contact us. So make sure you guys hit the right one. The one you're going to want to hit to report an encounter says report an encounter. Pretty straightforward.
And you guys also remember, submit questions for Bizarre Inquiries, our most of the time Patreon exclusive mini show. It can be just a question, it can be a clip, it can be an article. You could even use our fancy new hotline to submit a question if you want to. But just shoot us a question and we'll inquire about it. And all of this shit we've mentioned is in the link tree in the show descriptions.
Please welcome to the show, for the first guest of the spooky season, please welcome to the show, Jason Tapp from SpookyCLT.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Jason. It's always good to have a fellow North Carolinian on the show. We've had a few.
Is that the name, North Carolinian? Because it's Michigander for me, but Carolinian? I like that.
North Carolinian, yeah.
Carolinian?
A charlatan, yeah. I mean, that could go several different ways, I guess. But anyway, Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the work and research you do?
Yeah, so you brought me on here because I am the guy who does SpookyCLT. That stands for Spooky Charlotte, an airport code. CLT is something that we've really latched onto as a community. Orin, you would be Spooky RDU, I believe.
Yes, that's the airport here, yeah.
Exactly, but I would never say Raleigh-Durham referring to the same place because those are two very different places.
Very different, and in basketball season, even more so.
Wait. Are you Duke or are you Heels?
Neither. I'm NC State. So I got like the worst end of the deal. I can live with
that. If you said Duke, I was going to say, all right, podcast over.
No, I was not smart enough to get into Duke.
Yeah, I can't say anything. I went to UNC Wilmington.
Hey, that's a fine school. I mean, that probably would have been my second choice. So no shame there.
But SpookyCLT, what I'm doing is I'm trying to chronicle the spooky parts of Charlotte. So talking about dark history, like ghost stories, current paranormal activity, and then also highlighting, spooky subcultures. Morris Costumes, which is one of the largest Halloween costume retailers in the world, is located in Charlotte. We have a great underground band scene, which I would include under spooky. Right now, my passion is historic preservation, which I'm pretty much like the cemetery guy right now. So there's just a lot of different aspects of Charlotte that are spooky. And you could probably attest to this, Orin, when people think about Charlotte, they probably think more about banking.
Yeah.
Or
finance.
Guys in khakis and blue collared shirts walking down a city street. So that's something that I heard a lot when I first moved to Charlotte. And, I just kind of took it upon myself, wanted to set the story straight. And I was more interested with the ghost stuff than the history stuff at first. And now they're kind of really, really, really intertwined. So this is my way of putting Charlotte history out there, is by being the spooky guy that tells ghost stories.
That's awesome. Like you said, yeah, I've lived in North Carolina my whole life. I live in Raleigh, 2-3 hours down the road. And you just don't think of Charlotte as, this place with a lot of, folklore and history and whatnot. So I think it's really cool that you're doing that. I mean, apart from the current state of the Carolina Panthers being as spooky as it is, I'm sure there's a lot.
Would you believe that their stadium is built on top of an old hospital?
I would not.
Which was also built on top of an old gold mine. So if you wanted
is there
to
an
start
Indian
the rumor that
burial ground thrown in there anywhere?
We're on Catawba land, so it's very possible. So if you wanted to start the rumor that the Panthers are cursed or haunted, we kind of have some ground to stand on with that.
Literally.
Yeah, it's Charlotte is known as like a new city, and outside looking in, a lot of the buildings are brand new. I had in my living room right now, I have a framed picture of the Charlotte skyline from like 2004, and the building that I currently manage isn't even on it.
When was Charlotte founded? Like, what was, do you know, like the year? Just out of curiosity.
It was 1760.
1760. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So right before, I mean, we talked about this last time, but quick history of Charlotte is our city was on the cross paths of two major trading paths. We had, right now it's called Trade and Tryon, but it would be Tryon, which goes north-south with pretty much the Great Wagon Road. And then what is now Trade Street goes mountains to the beach. So we settled that area because it was a trading route. And then we built, or not we, but the Presbyterians, the Scott Irish, they built a community there. They were trading with the Catawbas. They eventually got a courthouse. They asked for more money, and they asked the king for more money, saying, hey, we'll name our town after your wife if you give us enough money to buy this courthouse. So we did. Now we are Charlotte, the Queen City. And then 5 years later, we said, hey, we actually are going to declare our independence from you and start a revolution. So we have our Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, which predates the Declaration of Independence by 1 year. Thomas Jefferson is said to have taken like literal quotes from the MECDEC and used it in the Declaration of Independence. John Adams in letters called him out on this. However, the original MECDEC is nowhere to be found in history. On May 20th, we celebrate MECDEC Day because it's the day that we allegedly wrote it.
So there's no actual physical copy that you guys know of this? No
physical copy, but we celebrate this guy named Captain Jack who rode from, he's pretty much our Paul Revere. He rode from Charlotte, North Carolina to Philadelphia saying like, hey, we declared independence from the king. Here's how we did it. Here's our verbiage. Roll with it. And then the story says that Congress was like, easy there, partner. We're not ready to do that. 1 year later, they, changed it up a little bit, and then they have their own Thomas Jefferson Declaration of Independence.
So what you're saying is the Declaration of Independence is actually like the first American act of plagiarism? Is that
absolutely 100%? Orin, every time you look at the state flag, you're going to see May 20th on there, and that's because of the MECDEC, the Mecklenburg Declaration.
Yeah, I feel like in school I learned, what the dates meant, but that's long gone.
Yeah. And just to bring something up quick too, Orin, you had mentioned the fact that you don't really like associate the city with folklore or anything like that, but at least from a lot of the stuff that we've covered, with having even like the Wizard Clip stuff, it seems like these like trading post towns where everything kind of intersects through, it builds up all this folklore of all these different cultures. So any place that's assumably some type of trade-off or trading post, like you're going to have such a big collaboration of folklore coming in from all the different types of people where it may not be, prevalent to everybody in the country, but at least to the city itself, like I guarantee you there's a bunch of local stories that get passed around that, if you're outside of the area, you've never heard of them before, but they've been something that's been passed around since the city was founded.
Well, so I mean, even more recently, so the city was founded, like I said before, about Scott Irish Presbyterians. So as soon as we got a Lake Norman, which was man-made in the 1960s, within years, we had our own version of the Loch Ness Monster.
We actually covered that on an episode. It's probably been a couple months ago now. We did like a Cryptids of North Carolina, and we covered Normie, and then we talked about like the Boojum and Nobby too. But no, it's funny you bring that up. I was going to actually ask you about Lake Norman later, but yeah, go ahead. I'd be interested to hear your expert opinions.
Well, so, I mean, one of the theory, once it's a man-made lake, the reason they put it there, they dammed up all these lakes so they could have hydroelectricity, along with they needed to be able to cool down the power plant. Because Lake Norman, they have a nuclear power plant on it. The water of the lake is used to cool, the turbines, and then it goes back into the lake. So, I mean, there were no matter what, there was going to be theories about, or at least like, lore of lake monsters. It's hard to get away from that.
Three-eyed fish.
It happens everywhere. But in our particular neck of the woods, we have all these Scottish people, descendants of Scottish clans. And as soon as we got a lake monster, they're like, hey, that's a descendant of Nessie. We brought that here, So other theories are, of course, mutated from the power plant. My personal favorite is there used to be kind of like a king of the lake. His name was Captain Gus. He did like the riverboat cruises. So everyone knew him. His theory is that he says that he knew the scientist that was crossbreeding fish to make them as beefy as possible so he can sell them at the market and make, a lot of money per pound. And then once the state found out and saying he was acting against God's will,
mad scientist shit.
He had to shut down his operation and let all the fish out into the lake. And now here we are generations later seeing, mutated giant beefy fish because of what that mad scientist was doing.
I love the fact that came from a guy who was just like a sailor on that lake, because that sounds like the most sailor story I've ever heard in my life. Right. I know the guy personally who created these mutant fish.
All right, y'all, we got to take a break and pay some bills. But if y'all want to stay up to date with the show, check us out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Discord. Just do all the internet things. And now back to the show. No, I think we covered that a little bit when we did the episode, but it was hard to kind of find a lot of really good stories and information about it. You know, I just kind of tried to comb the internet, but no, we should have had you for research then. It would have been a lot easier. Like, I didn't know about the whole thing about, trying to breed bigger fish to sell them. That's awesome.
Now, next time we do a North Carolina episode, you know who to hit up to try to see if you can get some extra info.
Every summer, I spend a week. I call it Lake Norman Monster Week, and it's my version of Discovery's Shark Week, where I'm just trying to talk about Normie for a full week. About how cool he is, about the history of the lake. Also, because it's a man-made lake, and this happens all over, but they completely flooded what used to be Mooresville to make Lake Norman. So there was an entire town under there. There was mills, there was plantation houses, mill towns, churches, schools, bridges, like actual infrastructure that is still underneath the lake because all they did was dam it up. The water raised right above it.
People go diving in there?
Moved 13 cemeteries, but Lake Norman coast is over 500 miles long, and you're only saying that there's 13 family cemeteries in that land. I don't buy it for a second. So there's bodies under that water for sure.
Are there people that have actually gone scuba diving down there? Because I'd love to see if I could find some pictures of this town underwater.
So there's YouTube videos of it. It's murky water because it's Carolina mud. It's, water over Carolina mud. You can't see much, but like there's YouTube videos. I've talked to guys who have done TikToks where they'll show on their radars where you can, like, the beeps come out and they'll, show the foundation of what used to be a mill or something underwater. If you go over aerial, if it's like the water is clear and still, some days you can see like a plane was submerged at one point. Truly wild stuff. And then also I'm sure this is the same in all lakes, but it's incredibly dangerous. And the lake racks up a pretty decent kill count every summer, mostly from people being irresponsible and drunk driving with boats and doing stupid stuff like that. But that area's police department, they have to use like submarine drones to go in there searching for people. They've actually recruited psychics when people have gone missing. They'll put them on the boat and say, like, can you find these people? One guy is Psychic Ed, and the answer is yes. He was able to find the person that they were looking for.
Wow.
It's wild.
Because the water's so murky or because it's so big?
Both. It's muddy water. Whenever I go out on the lake, typically around drinking holidays, I will never touch my foot to the bottom. I, jump off the dock and you float. That's it. Don't touch the bottom. You're not walking on the shore to get in there. And that's because it's just mud. You're putting your foot in and it'll suck you right up. And then, it's dirty water as well.
I wouldn't even want to jump in it at that point. I just enjoy it sitting on top of it on a boat.
There you go. That's what you say at first. And then you drink a little bit and everyone else starts jumping in.
That is true.
Well, I think it's awesome that you're, doing all this work to kind of promote the Loch Norman monster legend. We've kind of commented on the show before, like West Virginia and Ohio and all those kind of states have all the fun when it comes to cryptids. And, I think we need more stuff like that in North Carolina. So, if there's ever anything I can do to help you out with any of, your work with the Loch Norman stuff, I'm happy to do it. I think we need more kind of cryptid festivals down here. So,
dude, I'm trying for Lake Norman Monster Week to become a festival.
Hey, you got a perfect name already. That's half the battle. So.
Yeah, I made
and a mascot.
We have a mascot. His name is Normie, and he's the Lake Norman Monster. If I was upstairs in my kid's nursery, I would show you the stuffed animal version of him. But I would love to share with you two other cryptids in our immediate area.
Yeah, go for it, man. We'd love to hear.
I'm always down for cryptids.
So this one you probably heard of already. It's the Wampus cat.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
did we do an episode on that one at some point too, a long time ago?
We did Beast of Bladenboro, and this is kind of sort of similar, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'll touch on that, but yeah, the Wampus Cat it's not like the Beast of Bladenboro where it was like one thing that terrorized one place. Mm-hmm. It's just a legend that was already out there. And our version of it, because I'm sure you heard the story where it's supposed to be like a Native American woman who was eavesdropping on like the tribe, like the heads of the tribes, and then to punish her for eavesdropping, they turned her into a giant cat.
That sounds like it might be kind of a cool thing, though. That's not a punishment. That'd be cool.
That is an existing legend of the Yahweh, but whoever just hijacked it and then brought it on to the Wampus Cat. So the Wampus Cat is supposed to be like a six-legged kind of mountain lion cat that's just ferocious. What I also found is that historically in like newspapers in like the late 1800s, early 19s, they kind of refer to everything as a Wampus Cat, anything that they don't know what it is.
See, that's what I had heard. It was kind of like this catch-all term, and it could have been a bear, it could have been a bobcat or a cougar, or whatever was terrorizing people. They kind of called a Wampus Cat.
I'm gonna bring that up to Michigan and start using that in Michigan.
Hey, send some royalties back down here. We got enough of you fuckers down here anyway.
So the Charlotte Observer is one of my main sources. I look back at all, like you can access the archives because they have back until like 1890. So it's an incredible resource. But when they mentioned the Wampus Cat, I found like 3 decent stories, one of which they referred to it as like almost like a bear or like a Bigfoot, where it was a bipedal, big, hairy guy who was walking through a park, and kids reported it to the police because of how bizarre he looked. Another one was because a sheriff tracked down what he thought was like a mountain lion, but they referred to it as a Wampus Cat because of how ferocious it was. And he said he shot the thing 6 times with his revolver and didn't go down. There are just a few different stories, but like in my head, and you probably agree with this, is like North Carolina was filled with mountain lions. Like that was a main predator, part of our ecosystem, and we drove them to extinction about 40, 50 years ago. So we don't have to deal with it now, but like it was something that was like a very common thing to worry about. And those mountain lion, they'll hide up in the trees. They'll follow you while you're hiking, kind of just waiting for a good opportunity. So I think the Wampus was more of like just like a boogeyman.
Just to throw in some additional information too, this is kind of what we came to, at least for the Beast of Bladenboro, as a possible like theory on what this was. But in the early 1900s, hyenas were legal to have as pets. Like people had pet hyenas. Roosevelt had a pet hyena. Like it was a commonplace thing. And then they created a law on it, and everybody like released their hyenas. So near the early 1900s, there was this influx of like hyenas that were in the area, and people were having sightings of these things and not realizing what they were. So there's a good chance that people may have even seen hyenas and thought they were Wampus cats.
That definitely could be it. And in Wilmington, there's an area called Monkey Junction. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The reason it's called Monkey Junction is because there was like a gas station trading post that had a monkey as a pet there. And that's literally why they call it.
I never knew that's why it was called that.
Like the whole area now is called Monkey Junction.
Yeah.
Just this one little funny monkey was at a market.
Is it one of the ones that plays the little thing where you spin it and it plays music?
I'm sure.
No, I grew up in like the Emerald Isle area. So only like, an hour and a half from Monkey Junction, Wilmington, that whole area. But no, I never heard why it was called that. And, it's one of those things you just always hear it as a kid and you never really think, that's a really weird name.
I would have assumed some kind of like Sasquatch sighting or activity or something like, Ape Canyon or something,
So that's the Wampus Cat. Another thing, which is weird, and I'll just tell you what the facts are. So there is a podcast in town in Charlotte called The Katie Black Show. And at the back half of COVID, she had started doing live shows at this market where she would set up and she would bring in a guest or two to talk and, allow an audience. And And I went to a few of, or I only went to two. And the one that I went to, she was talking to her guests, and at the end of every show or at the end of every interview, she'll ask, do you have anything weird or unusual, unexplained, just something weird that you can share with us? And the first guy says, yeah, when I was driving through the Starmount neighborhood, which is just in like South End Charlotte, this guy was with his friends, and they came across a cat walking through the middle of the road, and they stopped, didn't want to hit the cat. And the cat just looks at them. They kind of start approaching it, hoping to scare it away so they can pass. And the cat spread wings and then flew at the car and attacked it. They said that it had turned from a cat into an owl. Crazy enough, like, story alone. But then the next person to get interviewed was like, you're going to ask what something unusual happened. I had to piggyback off the last guy, because when I was living in the Met area, like the metropolitan area, it's right outside Uptown. This guy said he was walking home from like Costco or from PJ's in the middle of the night, and he saw a owl like just hanging out on a chain link fence, and like it did the thing where like turns its head around to look at you. But then he said it got on all fours and started walking on the chain link fence. So it was an owl that turned into a cat. So so here we are on the show within an hour of each other. Two people who do not know each other, did not talk about this ahead of time, are both saying that they saw a cat owl hybrid. So I made a post about it, put it on my Spooky account. No one said anything. A year later or so, I was like, man, I wonder if anything happened. So I made a TikTok about it. And then on TikTok is when people started saying, like, yes, I've seen something like this. It wasn't just from Charlotte. It was a lot of people in North Carolina in general, a lot in the mountains, saying that they saw similar stuff. So I talked to, he was actually on your podcast, Shayn, Greg Fedora.
Yeah.
So I brought this up to him.
You met him last year, by the way, Orin, at Snarly Owl's Cryptid Halloween. He was the guy that was walking around with the fedora.
With the fedora.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He wrote the books, the Fedora File books.
Man, that name is just so damn literal.
Literally, that's like his whole thing.
So I told him about it, and he was like, I'll look into it. And then sure enough, he found like a Native American legends of the Westawahuhi, which was a cat-owl hybrid. Like, just wild. So now I consider it a Charlotte cryptid.
I think you're going to need to workshop a snappier name. That one doesn't really roll off the tongue.
So I've been saying the Charlotte cat owl, and I think that's good. I think that says it all.
Too bad it's not a bat, because cat bat sounds pretty dope. Cat owl sounds it's there, but it's like those two animal names like don't blend together in a good way.
I disagree, because the imagery of cats and owls like are already out there.
Or is it owl cat? Does it sound better as cat owl or owl cat? I feel like owl cat might sound a little bit better. It rolls off the tongue a little better.
I'm going with cat owl. Especially if you say it with a southern accent, like cat owl.
Yeah, but owl cat.
String it all into one thing.
Owl cat. See, that kind of flows too, though.
It's an alliteration, though. Charlotte cat owl. You know.
We love alliteration on this show.
Exactly.
The CLT cat or owl cat. CLT owl cat.
So that those are my Charlotte cryptids that I know of, at least.
No, that's awesome. I've never heard of the cat owl. That's something I'm definitely going to have to look into.
Still workshopping that name.
Patent pending. But I think that's kind of interesting, especially when you get into like all sorts of like alien encounters and high strangeness and stuff. Like owls seem to pop up time and time again. So it's kind of interesting that there's this like shape shifting
and the cat from the paranormal part. So you got the extraterrestrial and the paranormal animals kind of mixed together.
Yeah.
Even witchcraft. Owls were in medieval times. Owls were like a sign of witches, and obviously cats.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Layla Chusa.
Aliens could be witches.
Witches that turns into an owl. There you go.
No, that's awesome.
So, real interesting thing, and I really hope it like we get another sighting, or like someone picks it up on a Ring camera or something,
Hold on tight, guys. We're going to take a brief commercial break. But if you guys enjoy the work we do over here and you guys want to support what we do, you guys can do it in one of three ways. You guys can either check out the Patreon, which we do have multiple tiers, all with 7-day free trials available, or you guys can go and check out the Open Minds Media merch store, where we have a lot of awesome designs for the show and a lot of awesome designs for a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show. And number 3, you guys can always go and leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. And of course, if you guys leave a 5-star review, we'll read on the show and give you guys a big shout out. And we are back to the show, so let's hop right in.
Well, it seems like these, for lack of a better term, like newer cryptids, not that this is new since you have, the Native American heritage of it, but it's just now coming into more the public consciousness. But it seems like once you start putting these things out here, people kind of latch onto it. I'm sure you've kind of seen in your research just over the past few years, like Dogman has just blown up, so I think
Slenderman and the Rake.
Yeah. So I think as soon as, these things are put out there, people start connecting dots and they're like, oh my God, I saw something like that, back when I was a kid or whatever the case may be. So I think, the fact that we have these sort of platforms to share these stories really is a good thing for popularizing and bringing attention to these kind of local, super specialized cryptids and legends.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I thought of a great name for another convention. Talking about trying to do localized cryptid conventions to bring the word out. Michigan's is Dogman. You could do one called DogCon.
DogCon. That's solid.
So, Jason, I guess we kind of already started talking about a little spooky stuff, but since we are in spooky season, would you mind sharing with us some of your kind of more ghostly, spooky, October-esque stories, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So on my account right now, I am doing 13 Ghosts of Charlotte. So pretty much every other day, I'm going to be posting a story about a local ghost and doing my best to paint the picture. So I have already posted 2 of them as of today. The first one's my favorite, and Shayn, we talked about this last time I was on the show, and that is the Dunhill Hotel. The Dunhill Hotel is the oldest hotel in Uptown Charlotte right now, just coming up to 100 years old. Changed ownership over the years a number of times. The whole lore of the building is that it was built right around the time of the Great Depression. And it was the tallest building in Uptown at the time. Charlotte's a huge banking city, so when the market dropped and a lot of these bankers, they didn't see a way out, they would spend their last dollar on a hotel room, go to the top, come down. That story has followed the Dunhill all this time. And in the 80s, for about a decade, it was actually abandoned before the owner renovated it and bought it and spruced it all up in the late 80s, early 90s. But while they were doing that renovations, they actually found a skeleton, human remains at the bottom of what was the elevator shaft. So 30 years later, modern times, it is a haunted hotel. You've talked to staff, bartenders, housekeepers. They'll all tell you they've had their own experiences. I work near the Dunhill, so I bumped into one of the bartenders the other day, and he was like, man, I need to tell you, I've been working there for months. Nothing ever happened to me personally. I heard all the stories, but I was in the storage room, and the door slammed behind me, not gently shut by itself, not hits a gust of wind in a closed off room, but it slammed behind him. And he said that was like the first time where something happened where I couldn't explain how it happened. It had to have been a ghost. So staff has designated that type of poltergeist activity as Dusty the Dunhill, saying that it's the spirit of the skeleton that they found. Now, crazy thing is about 2 summers ago, CMPD, so our police department, got access to a whole new slew of DNA that they could run cold cases on. So they ran the DNA from Dusty the Dunhill ghost's bones, and they were actually able to connect them to people living in Mooresville at Lake Norman. And they identified the guy. His name was Odell. And he was a World War II vet. He worked at the Belk that was 2 blocks away, but his family said that he became homeless. So he must have found shelter in the Dunhill. Something happened, and that was where he laid to rest. All this time, you go on a ghost tour, and they're still saying we have no idea who this guy is, because that was just the norm for the past 30 years. But we finally know who he is. I'm not convinced that it was his spirit that was, doing all this activity, or else it would have stopped when we found out his name. But something spooky is going on over there in the Dunhill Hotel. And if you want to be a city that has paranormal tourism, you have to have a haunted hotel, and luckily we have that.
That's wild. I mean, I think that makes the story so much cooler. I mean, because anybody can say, oh, we've got a haunted hotel, but you can go back and say, hey, it was this guy, his family lives right up the road. Like, that just makes it so much more real as far as I'm concerned.
It's so, if you look at my Instagram right now, like, you'll see it, me doing this, but like, this is him.
Oh, wow.
This is him. We have a picture. So check out my Instagram. You can see me doing the 13 ghosts. I'm on 2 right now. And you can see a picture of Odell Mundy. Yeah, just wild stuff.
Yeah, I got it pulled up right now. That's awesome, man. I'm definitely going to have to dig more into this. I just gave you a follow. So
hell yeah.
Yeah, definitely. This is something I'm going to have to follow throughout the month. Yeah.
Sticking with that. So Shayn, you mentioned earlier that I have quite a few events planned for this month in October. I have made a close relationship with the Historic Landmark Commission in town. And then also I was just nominated and accepted to be on the board of the Historic Elmwood Cemetery.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Congratulations, man.
I appreciate it. So my journey of historic preservation is like making moves.
You got a title to go with it now, too.
Exactly. I can put something in my signature other than SpookyCLT.
And I know you mentioned that you kind of had a thing where you wanted to start saving graveyards and stuff like that on the previous episode. So now at least you have a title and say, look, I'm already part of this board for this one. Like, let us do something with this place. Get a little bit more push when you're trying to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's true. And so this coming Saturday, October 5th, first Saturday of the, October, I helped organize a headstone cleaning event for Elmwood, which I'm now on the board of. So we have about like 90 volunteers. We're trying to clean 50 headstones. This cemetery is 72 acres. It's freaking huge. But we're out there. I'm hoping to inspire like a whole new group of people that will find smaller cemeteries and do it themselves. But that's one event. And then the other one is I'm actually giving a tour of the cemetery, talking about all of the like macabre deaths that happened affiliated with that cemetery. Do you guys want to go on that tour with me real quick right now?
Absolutely.
I was going to say, absolutely. No questions asked.
I'll run through this to make sure you know the good details. But it's cool. It's going to be like an hour and a half long when I do it because we're walking about a mile. But we should probably be able to knock this out in the next 15 minutes.
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right. So Elmwood Cemetery, it was first established in 1853. I told you 72 acres. The thing is pretty huge. It's now Elmwood Pinewood Cemetery. It used to be Elmwood and then segregated Pinewood, whites, blacks. So first stop on the tour, pretty much right at the center of the new entrance, is this beautiful white obelisk with an elephant and a palm tree carved into it. And this is for John King. And John King was an animal trainer for the John Robinson Circus. And he met a gruesome end in 1880 when an unhappy elephant named Chief deliberately crushed him to death and then took to the streets of Charlotte. They actually had to bring out a female elephant to calm him down because Chief was pissed. They said that his testosterone levels were through the roof. He was insanely aggravated, and John King was known to be like an animal abuser. So Chief crushed him, took to the streets, and then they had to chain him to marry the elephant just so he would calm down and they could bring him back to the circus. 2 weeks later, in the next town over, Chief the elephant killed the next trainer as well. So then they shipped him off to Cincinnati, where they tried to put them in the Cincinnati Zoo, but he went on another rampage. So they death by firing squad for Chief the elephant, and then a bunch of rich people actually ate him as steaks.
What the hell? I was going to say, at least it's a better end than Tipsy, but no, definitely not.
Nope. Firing squad, they ate him, and then they actually stuffed his body, and they put him in a parade that the Cincinnati used for years later. So terrible ending for Chief, but I always bring
Justice for Chief.
I was going to say, just out of curiosity, what year was this, did you say?
1880.
1880. Okay, so it wasn't totally out of the question for people to be eating zoo animals at this point, because I know that, like, during the World Wars, it was like a thing that people would go into the zoos and eat all the animals. So by the end of World War II, there was like no animals left in zoos because it was whatever meat you could get, I guess.
That's terrible. What a terrible fact. So I always bring up the story of Chief around Labor Day, saying Chief is a Labor Day hero. If your working conditions are not good, you stomp on your boss to death and you take to the streets.
And hopefully not get firing squatted and turned into steak.
Saying eaten in the end.
He's a martyr. He's a martyr. All right. So the next stop is going to be the unknown boy. It's just this little placard of a grave where a boy who is aged 14 to 15 was found crushed to death in a railroad boxcar, and his identity is still unknown to this day. A charitable organization known as the King's Daughter, which was like a women's Christian group, they paid for him to be buried and for him to have his headstone, but they also paid for his obituary to be spread throughout the East Coast. They put a picture of his face in the newspaper saying, do you know who this boy is? Because they were trying to find out who he was. To this day, we have no idea.
He was in a boxcar. He assumably was probably just some homeless kid, unfortunately, that didn't have any family or anything.
Something in the boxcar moved. He was crushed to death. We have no idea how long he was on there. Where he came from, nothing. So to this day, he is still just an unknown boy.
Remembered by his least favorite action in his life.
So the next one is terribly sad. There is a little headstone for Foy Cooper, and right underneath it says mother. And Foy Cooper met an untimely death on September 20th, 1959, after she was attacked while visiting her mother's grave in Elmwood Cemetery. She was viciously beaten and strangled, and the killer stuffed her body in a nearby mausoleum in the Pinewood Cemetery section, so like the segregated part, and left her for local children to find. A group of kids had just seen the movie Dracula on the big screen. They went to the cemetery and were daring each other to go into mausoleums. They dared one of the kids, and he found a dead body of Foy Cooper in there.
Not to add too much of a sad backing to it, but I'm not sure which cemetery was which, but was this like a African American woman found in like the white cemetery? So maybe it could have been some like racial violence considering it was the 1950s, or
no, Foy Cooper was a white woman, but she was killed and stuffed onto the black side. Now, they had a suspect at the time. His name was Elmwood Davis. He had actually just gotten out of prison. So he was apprehended the next day and charged with her murder. After his trial later that year, he was sentenced to death but was brought to county jail. And then he appealed the case. And in 1966, he was set free. He was claiming that it was a false confession. So in the newspapers, the detectives say, we found Elmer. He had a come to Jesus moment and confess to everything. Elmer says that they found him, beat him, starved him, and dehydrated him until he was willing to say that he did it, and that's what he did. He felt like his life was in danger, so he said he'll do it just so he can get his next meal. And then for the rest of the time in prison, he said, no, I did not do it. And they built up a case, and he got out. So to this day, we have no idea who killed Foy Cooper, but when you visit her headstone, first off, like it's on top of a hill in Elmwood, so you get this beautiful view of the skyline. But you look down, you see her headstone, and then 6 feet to the left, you see her mother's headstone. So that's the same spot that she was going to visit her mother. She did it every weekend, and then one weekend she did it, and she was murdered because of it.
Wow.
So you're standing, while you're looking at her headstone, you're standing within a few feet of wherever it happened.
That's almost kind of morbid that her exact gravesite is the place where
she was murdered.
Where she was murdered at. Like
that is very uncommon. And a lot of times cemeteries are so affiliated with like ghost and paranormal stuff, but like, does that really make sense? Because like the person was never really there. In the cemetery, that's just where their body is. That doesn't really mean much to the spirit, but in this case, like she was there. It was not a good death. They said, she was beaten, mauled, and other terrible things.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. But while we're on commercial break, if you guys don't mind checking out the sponsors of the show, I Know Squatch, Cryptotheology, Snarly Owl Natural Products, Oregon-ite, Dimension Devices, and Big Ape Threads. All information and discounts are available in the show description. Now back to the show. Random side note, just a random thought I had. You mentioned the fact of, most people don't die in cemeteries. So I don't know where like the whole idea comes from them being haunted. And just kind of guessing, I'm assuming that maybe the whole reason why people believe cemeteries were haunted was back in the day when they didn't know if people were actually alive or not. And they used to do the bells and everything like that. I think that may have been where like the haunted graveyard concept came from, was from people actually like suffocating and dying in the graves. And then we kind of just carried it on. And now it's one of those things we kind of lost touch on why we thought these places were haunted in the first place, using our like more recent knowledge of the paranormal.
Yes, but also at the same time, like cemeteries, at least in America, I can't speak otherwise, but there were public parks. It was encouraged for you to take strolls and picnics, and even Elmwood Cemetery used to have fountains and an actual swimming pool in it, like a public pool for people to visit. It was a public park. So at least
there just happen to be some bodies here and there, but it's all good. Have your fun.
I mean, like personally, I take my daughter, she's 2, to cemeteries all the time because it's like a place where we get to walk around. Never anyone else. I can just let her roam and stuff, and I don't have to worry about her breaking anything because it's
all stone and dirt.
Exactly. So like I'm comfortable there. If I was a ghost in a cemetery where my body was, I would want people to visit me and to have fun and to, be lively. Obviously respectful, don't break stuff, but like,
I mean, people had a different connection with the afterlife until relatively recently. Because, I mean, even back in the early 1900s, people were still taking, like, the death photos where a family member would pass, and before they'd bury him, they'd take, like, one last family picture with them and stuff. And, they'd leave them displayed out in the house for a couple days. Like, there's a lot less of this, like, don't want to talk about its separation with death, like, back in the day versus now. Now it's like, we don't want to talk about it. Back then, they wanted to be around their past family members and stuff. So, like, the park makes sense.
The Day of the Dead celebration is when they actually have festivals inside cemeteries, and they make their ofrendas around the headstones, and they bring them offerings and stuff. Like they're celebrating their connection with the dead during those days. And I think that's something that we should actively try to bring back. Number one, use the public space for God's sake. And then number two, just have a better, more respectful outlook or, of the dead.
I think we go up and down on this stuff though, because obviously back in the Victorian age, people were very into spirituality. It was the rise of spiritualism and stuff like that. So it's of course people didn't have this fear because they were at home doing rituals and all this kind of stuff in order to try to speak to dead family members. It was totally common practice. And I feel like it's we go in these spats where it's society wants to believe in the paranormal and then they don't. It seems like we kind of dropped out, but since late 90s, 2000s, it's slowly building back up to having that connection where everybody starts to believe in the paranormal again.
We're back. I think it was the New York Times or something did a poll, and we're at the highest of people believing in ghosts again, that we've been in years.
Oh, as far as phenomenon goes, I'd say ghosts, aliens, cryptids. That's kind of how that goes as far as people's belief.
Yeah, we're back. All right, so the next stop on my tour is to my best friend, Charlie Hawk, who I told you about last time. So Charlie Hawk, he was a 65-year-old lion trainer with the Melville Res Circus Show. And on January 9th, 1930, in Charlotte, he was killed by a lion. And that's what his headstone says. It says, Charlie Hawk killed by a lion.
That's like the best headstone ever.
Truly. He died on the operating table just a few blocks away from the cemetery. It was St. Peter's Hospital, and now it's condos that people live in. It's next to a Harris Teeter. And you said that's a great headstone, and I couldn't agree more, which is why for the past 2 years I've been working on having it fixed. It was broken into a bunch of small pieces and then kind of like stacked together up against a chain link fence. So when I found out about that, I started organizing with raising money to get the headstone replaced. Last year around this time in October, I did a fundraiser by doing a ghost hunt in Latta Arcade, which is this beautiful little marketplace in Uptown Charlotte. But now we have paid for it. The work is done. It is getting installed within like the next 2 weeks. And I'm very excited to see it up and standing. What we did is we actually bought like a new marble piece for it, and then we engraved Charlie Hawk killed by a lion with the garland and the flower medallions that it has on it. And then on the back is where we attached the old stones that are still part of it. So you just got to walk to the back to see the original. It's right next to train tracks. So I think over years, it just kind of vibrated itself to death. I don't know if someone knocked it over. But the new thing that we have is going to be sturdy, and I shouldn't have to get it replaced for the next 100 years.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
I think I mentioned this to you when you came on Inquiries, but you got to make like something for that, like that people can resell.
Paperweight or like something to put in yard.
Dude, you got to make like a mold of it that's like miniature or something like that. And you can just use like Quikrete and make like a miniature thing that people could put in their yards and stuff like that. Like that'd be perfect, dude. Or make it out of foam where you have like a mold.
Oh yeah.
It sounds like exactly one of those things you'd find at like a Halloween store, like the exact wording on it. But it's real, so that's what makes it even better.
By a lion. All right, so the next stop would be a gentleman by the name of Alton Reed Freeman. And Alton gained notoriety in 1926 after his wife, Nellie, fatally slashed his throat with a razor, nearly decapitating him. Nearly. She did not behead him. When she was apprehended by the police, she said she just gave him a little nick. But they said that he was nearly decapitated. So
just a little nick, and I just saw it just a little bit afterwards.
It was a straight razor. She said she just gave him a little nick, and they found him literally, head dangling off his shoulders.
That must have been a sharp-ass razor. I mean, just a whoops.
So in the trial, this became like a whole like media circus. Like Charlotte called her Nellie the Razor Girl. Like that was her name, as if she was a serial killer. And on the trial, she said that she had a bout of temporary insanity. The jury found her not guilty. She because Alton was this like 6 foot tall big guy, and she was this. The newspaper says she was like a dainty little girl, so they had a hard time taking her seriously, to say. And then even her mother-in-law, so Alton's mother, testified for her, saying that, Alton wasn't a good guy. Nellie is a very good girl. And the two of them remained friends even when Nellie remarried. Her and her mother-in-law became friends for a long time. It was said that Alton was cheating on her, that he faked an injury so he wouldn't have to work and made her work. And then when he was drunk one day, he said, "I'm going to move away with one of these women I'm cheating on with." And then just a little nick and his head was hanging off his shoulders. Yeah, Alton Freeman murdered by the Razor Girl here in Charlotte.
Moral of the story, hide sharp objects.
Hide sharp objects.
If you're going to do something stupid, at least hide the sharp objects.
So just another note about Elmwood Cemetery in general. I found this article that was posted in 1914 or 1942. This police chief was retiring, and he was talking about different interesting things that happened during his career. And one of the things that he said was, back then, the police couldn't keep folks buried in Elmwood Cemetery. Students at the North Carolina Medical College, then located in Charlotte, right up the street, were accustomed to taking pick and shovel to Elmwood for a bit of Sunday night replenishment of the cadaver cupboard. And it got to be quite a nuisance. Sometimes they didn't even wait for the flowers to wilt. So the Board of Aldermen detailed a special patrol, and the police death watch grew into being. So at one point...
You don't want decaying bodies if you're trying to do science, man. You got to get them fresh, right?
So at one point, the police had a special patrol in Elmwood Cemetery specifically to stop medical students from digging up graves for their cadavers to use at the medical college that was right down the street.
I just imagine some like cheesy British comedy of like some dudes walking up with flashlights. Hey, you, what are you doing over there? They're like all covered in dirt and I got shovels. They're like, nothing. We're just putting this back. Okay, we'll carry about it.
All right, so last stop on the tour, and I'm proud to say that this stop actually happens like within 30 feet of John King. So it really is a solid circle in the tour. And I only do about half of the cemetery because, like I said, 72 acres, and I got it down to just under a mile. So we have Pruitt Black. And Pruitt was a firefighter with the Charlotte Fire Department until 1934. When responding to a call, he missed sliding down the pole from the top floor at the fire station number 4, and he fell to the ground where he fractured his skull and died. He is said to be the spirit of the Firehouse 4 because this firehouse is one of only 3 pre-World War II firehouses in Charlotte, and it still stands today. It became a fire department museum for a few decades, and then when that failed or went out of business or whatever, it was changed into office space. And when it was changed into office space, that's when they really started reporting weird things going on. It was actually like a creative marketing company. So they acknowledged the history of working in a firehouse. And they would put these firefighters' coats on the racks in there, and they had some tools and stuff. And they said that the coats were always on the ground. No matter how tightly they secured them, they would see an apparition of a man wearing one of those types of coats walking through a wall that used to not be there. It used to be like an open space. And then the big thing is that they would always smell cigar smoke. No one in the office was smoking stogies, but they would always smell it. And one thing that I found in researching Pruitt is that, like, when they were talking about his funeral, they said that Pruitt was a chain smoker. He was also always smoking cigarettes, but his wife and kids had no idea. They said that they had never seen him smoke anything before. He only did it at work. But he was a chain smoker at work. You
got to do it at work if you can't do it at home, right? That's how it goes. You just chain smoke while you're at work.
Yep. So now whenever you smell stogie smoke in this abandoned firehouse, that's our boy Pruitt. Now the crazy thing is that this story pops up a lot, and the fire department uses it to this day because they say that the call that he was responding to when he fell down the pole was actually a false alarm. There was no fire. Wow. The thing was pulled for no reason, and it ended in his death. So they use that as an allegory to say, do not cause false fire alarms, because you could cause someone to trip and fall down the pole and crack their head open.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, Pruitt Black. Now it's when I'm doing this tour. At this point, you can see the skyline of uptown Charlotte, and there's this big 60-floor apartment building called The View. And I get to point to it and say, right next to that building is a 2-story firehouse from before World War II, next to this 62-floor apartment building that's been around for only like 15 years.
Hey, I guess that's a gentrification for you, isn't it?
That is. I'm glad that the firehouse is still there. I actually was talked to their leasing broker trying to see if I could get a ghost hunt in there to do another fundraiser. And they said, not now, but they are converting it to a event space. And when they do that, if I'm doing a fundraiser that they approve of, then they'll allow me to come in and bring some people in there.
Well, I think it's awesome you're doing all this work to keep all this heritage and folklore alive. I mean, like I said, stuff that happened 3 hours down the road from where I live, I've never even heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we talk about this on the show a lot, but when people who tell these stories start dying out, they're going to be lost. So, I mean, I think people like you are doing a huge service to not only their local communities, but like the whole paranormal community as a whole. So thank you for
that, man.
Everything you're doing to keep this folklore alive.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be back with that bizarre stuff you crave. And we are back with the high strangeness. Let's get back into it. Charlotte's unofficial historian. I think you got that title. Or official. You could be the official at this point.
There is like an alternative newspaper, and last year they voted me the #1 amateur historian.
There you go.
And it's funny because they never put the amateur in until that year. They're like, we want to give this to you, but we can't say that you're an actual historian.
Oh, hey, it's better than nothing,
okay,
I guess.
with that. I'm all right.
So before we kind of start wrapping up, I did want to ask you one other question since we're talking about ghosts and spooky stories and whatnot. Mm-hmm. You said you went to school at UNCW. I've always heard that the battleship there in Wilmington is extremely haunted. Have you ever heard anything about that or have any stories or even personal experiences as far as that goes?
When you're talking a battleship, are you talking like an actual battleship or are you just calling what you call the school
a full-on battleship? You can like go and take tours of it. Or, well, Jason, I'll let you. You're probably
holy crap. I just want to make sure I separate that before you got too far in.
No, it's an actual battleship.
Wilmington is a port city, so it's right on the coast. And then like the downtown version is on the Cape Fear River. So, end of World War II, the historic committee saved this battleship and they brought it from up north down to Wilmington, fixed it, now it just floats there and it's a living history museum. But it's haunted. It's been on the ghost shows. It's been featured at pretty much all of the big like American TV shows that go to paranormal tourist traps. It's on there. So my wife and I, we did an overnight ghost hunt 2 years ago, I believe, maybe 3 years ago, and I'll get to that. But what's even funnier is when I went to UNCW, I was taking film classes, and our film assignment, we did do a mini documentary on the paranormal side of the ghost. But the day that we were going to film and do interviews, I got a 24-hour bug. I had never been that sick before. I'm the son of a Navy nurse, so if I get sick, I keep it to myself until it's too bad. And that day was the only day in my college career where I had to tell someone I can't be there. I'm too sick. So looking back now, I'm I wonder if I was getting if there was something at play there. But anyways, my wife and I, we did this overnight tour of the battleship, and we had toured it during the daytime before, but this time it was an actual ghost group overnight, and a few weird things did happen. I wish more did. But we did a group when we're all talking to each other, and there was a medium there, and they said that they could see a shadow figure over my shoulder. And I can't remember what they said, but the things that they were describing, my wife was that's describing my grandfather, what you're saying, between the height, the history that she believed that they were coming along with, and just a brief description. My wife was that was, yeah. And now I'm completely blanking on the other stuff that happened. But it's a creepy place. If you're in the area, it's worth the trip to check it out.
Yeah, I haven't been there since I was in middle school, but that's definitely something that I want to go back and visit again now that I'm more into this whole paranormal, cryptid, high strangeness world than I was back then. So I bet it would hit a little bit different now.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and the history of it is cool. Part of it, not cool. it does have dark history. The battleship itself was hit by a torpedo, which ended in like over a dozen lives being lost. And I read the book that the old security guard, like the overnight lighthouse keeper, almost like he was the guy who stayed on site overnight in case anything happened. He wrote a book about everything that happened. And one of the things that he describes is being followed around by this like tall blonde guy. And as soon as he saw a picture of like the people that were lost to the torpedo, he was like, that's him. That's the guy who's been following me all these years. And he has a whole slew of other stories that happened to him when he was living on that boat.
Well, maybe it's from that book or that gentleman's stories, but the story I always heard was like in the kitchen area of the battleship, they had like alphabet magnets on the refrigerator just for like decoration, and the workers would come and go, and like the magnets would be rearranged and there would be like messages on them and whatnot. And it was, times that theoretically no one should have been there. So I don't know if maybe that came from that book, but that's like the story that always stuck in my head that I heard about the battleship.
I don't think so. I've never heard that one.
Okay.
But that's cool. And that, like that food hall is right next to their chapel too.
Okay.
Which is weird because like on one side you're seeing all these benches and on the other side they have it like glassed in, but it's like a church pulpit in a small area. Yeah, a real spooky place for sure. Definitely worth the visit.
Well, Jason, if you're ever in the Raleigh area, you should definitely hit me up. We've got a couple spooky things around here. We've got a big cemetery. It's called Oakwood, so I guess like every cemetery kind of has the same name, but it's got like a statue of a angel and supposedly like the head turns. Yeah. So we've got
checked that out before.
Are you familiar with the Mordecai House?
Haven't been, but I've heard podcasts on it. I follow Ghost Guild who
they do a lot of work out there. Me and my girlfriend went and visited it. It's probably been a couple Octobers ago now. Took our ghost hunting devices out there. It's a good time. If you're ever in the area, you should definitely check that out too.
Yeah, it is. It's on the list for sure.
I think we covered that one on an episode a long time ago too. Wasn't that like one of the first like grab bag things we did with back when Jenny was on the show?
Yeah, we did a local lore, and that's what Jenny did for it. So
yeah, I knew that sounded familiar. I knew we covered that at some point.
Yep, for sure. All right, y'all. Last ad break for today's episode, and now back to the show.
Man, I appreciate you making the time to come on today and talk about all this spooky stuff. Obviously, super awesome. You're able to connect with Orin, considering he's from North Carolina, too. So you guys kind of brought this different facet in that, I'm not from North Carolina, so I couldn't make as many connections as you guys and stuff. But as far as everybody coming and trying to follow your work, trying to keep tabs on any events you have going on, I know you mentioned a couple of them, but if you want, you can tell people events you have going on for October if you want to give them another spot to let them know about them. But let them know about any events you got coming up and where people can follow you and check you out on the internet.
Yeah, so follow me on at SpookyCLT on Instagram. This month I'm doing that 13 Ghosts of Charlotte, which I'm most excited about. This Saturday, the 5th of October, I'm doing the headstone cleaning of Elmwood Cemetery. And then on the 19th, which is the 2 Saturdays later, I'm doing the tour that you just listened to. You can register for both of those through the Historic Landmark Commission of Charlotte. And then end of the month is the Friday and Saturday, the 25th and 26th of October. We're doing Voices from the Past After Dark, which is like our Elmwood does a event where they have living history, people representing people like famous people that were buried in the cemetery, talking to everyone as if they were, their ghosts and telling them the history, what happened to them and their connections with Charlotte. And now we're doing the spooky version of that in the end of October. At least fingers crossed, because we were supposed to have a Teams call at 6:30 and no one was sent the invite. So it's like, who's running this thing,
Sounds like you got to take charge of it, eh?
I'm busy, man. So we'll see what happens with that one. But either way, follow me on Instagram, SpookyCLT. Follow me on TikTok, also SpookyCLT. And then SpookyCLT.com. If you are not on the social media, you can see all of my links to past articles and all that good stuff on there. But yeah, number one thing is just check out my Instagram and follow along with the 13 Ghosts of Charlotte, because I'm really excited about it for this month.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jason. You taught me a lot. I'm sure you taught a lot of our listeners something. Like I said, I grew up here my whole life, never knew any of this stuff. So thank you so much.
One more fact for you. So
Absolutely.
Charlotte's called the Queen City. And I told you it's because we're named after Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. But also a Queen City is when the city is larger than the capital. So Charlotte is larger than Raleigh.
It is.
And therefore we are the Queen City because we're bigger than y'all.
Yes, we are a beta capital here in North Carolina.
You said it, not me.
Hey, no shame in our game here. We're self-aware.
Hey, if you're going to be small, you at least got to be proud of it, eh?
There you go.
It's not the size of the city. It's the motion of something. But anyway, y'all got the NFL team. You win. So.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you so much.
And all the listeners, of course, I will put your links down in the show description so everybody can find them quick and easy. So make sure you guys check up on that. And if you guys are in the North Carolina area, don't forget to set a spot to be able to go and check out some of these tours.
All right, y'all. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely reach out to us and get a hold of us any way you want to. Shayn, why don't you tell them how they can do that? Well,
you can use the new Hotline OMM Encounter Reports number that we set up that we mentioned earlier in the show, which is 313-364-1551. Or you guys can email us at bizarreencounters@outlook.com, or you can get a hold of us through social media, Instagram or Facebook. Or you guys can also use the submission forms, which are available on the link tree. One of them is for contacting us, and the other one is for reporting an encounter. So make sure you guys use the proper one, and don't forget to report those encounters, of course. And every single thing that we mentioned throughout the show is all available on the link tree, which is available down in the show description. And with that, I've been the one that they call Shayn. Squatch.
And I've been Orin.
And guys, I tell you every single show, but especially this spooky season, don't be afraid to let your freak flags fly, and always, always stay bizarre. Bizarre. Bizarre.
8675309.
Is that the number for?
No, it's like the hotline. Like, Jenny gotta know. Like, you're just saying the phone number so many times, and like that's all I can think of. You should leave this part in. Don't cut it.
I'll just leave it. Cut it right here.